All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. And once again, I have the immense pleasure of being joined by the man, the myth, the legend, and all of those points above. I'm talking about the one and only Mark Jenkins. Mark, how are you doing, man?
Hey man, how's it going? Well, good to see you. Good to hear from you, man. It's going to be a great topic, man. Coming off of the buzz of a great show last week, and again, you picked another good one for us to really sink our teeth into. And you know, like the T-shirt says, I'm not wearing it by mistake. We're about to give you people some free words of wisdom.
Listen, man, there you go. Ain't no shucking and jiving. I know, listen, I'm sounding, using words sounding like, from our dad's eras or even our granddad's eras. But nonetheless, I mean, let's just get to it. And when I say get to it, because it's a hot topic right now and it ain't going away for a while, okay? And that is the question of who is or who will be the new face of the National Basketball Association. Before I flip it back over to you, I think most people will agree that this current era of basketball belongs to the likes of LeBron, belongs to the likes of Steph Curry, belongs to the likes of Kevin Durant. But of course, as great as these guys have been for their respective NBA careers. And of course, they've done it at the Olympic level as well. Okay. And not just from a basketball aspect, what they've done off the court as well. Okay. But how much longer can they play? All right. We're talking about LeBron just becoming the first player in NBA history to score 50,000 career points when you combine what he's done in the regular season as well as the postseason. We're talking about Steph Curry with what he's done from behind the 3-point line and basically changed the game on that aspect. And then, of course, a Slim Reaper, Kevin Durant. But nonetheless, those guys ain't going to be around forever. And it's time to ask yourself who's going to open that door and be the next face of the NBA. And of course, it's been a hot topic. We heard Ant-Man's comments during All-Star weekend, as far as basically not really wanting to be the face of the NBA. We heard LeBron basically back Anthony Edwards up and basically, just paraphrasing, saying, why would anybody want to be the new face of the NBA? Are there any truths to those comments from both Ant Man and LeBron, in your opinion?
I think there's truth to all of that, and I mean, we can look at this topic in a bunch of different ways. And that's why I really like this topic because I think there's so many points to discuss here. But first and foremost, right now, I think where the NBA is where it kind of has been since we've been in the post Jordan era, which is faced by committee. And there's always kind of that de facto guy, so to speak, Kobe, LeBron, um, maybe now if we're saying this committee thing, it might be Luca with him in LA, especially kind of being the de facto leader of this new committee. Because to your point with LeBron, it was not just him; it was Curry, it was Durant along with him. It was kind of those three. Those are the three faces of that era, so to speak. Like when you look at Jordan's era, like Barkley and Ewan and Olajuwon are not like sitting in that picture with him when they talk about his era. Like they're great players, all of them that I just mentioned, but no disrespect, Hakeem. I don't want your massive hand slapping me after what I heard Vernon Maxwell say, but they were kind of side notes of that era. So, like it's committee now, and that's the interesting part of this whole debate since then. And I blame the media, the mainstream media of Jordan's day for that, which is going to be a whole nother topic that we'll get into later with that. I blame them for doing that. But since then, there's never been anyone to kind of compare. There's always been, if you think about it, three guys, four guys, five guys that they push at the faces of the league now, and they've never been able to get just one guy. And if LeBron, in my opinion, doesn't command the star power to do that,
Hmm.
then who's going to do that? Like, I don't see a singular person going forward. Like Luca maybe taking the reins of it, but there's always going to be your five guys. And right now, to me, those five guys are Luca, Anthony Edwards, Jason Tatum. A lot of people don't put him in there, but you got to give him his respect. Obviously, the Joker being probably the best of everyone, and then Giannis. Those are the guys. And here's where let's kind of I want to dive into my first little side point because there's so many with this. Here's where I think it gets murky, especially with US media, because a handful of those guys that I just named are all foreign born players. So a lot of the American media, yes, they love these players and want to praise them for their accolades on the court and things like that. But to be the face of the league is so much more than that. And that's where I think the US media is hesitant to give them what they deserve, and they can't truly be a face of the league.
Well, I mean, listen, there's definitely some truth to what you said. I think, is the media to blame for it? Yeah. There's a lot of different ways you can go through that. I think too often, and it's not just happened, it just hasn't just happened with this generation. It's happened with players in the past, okay, regardless of the sport. Somebody's career really fully is not really fully appreciated until that person is about to retire or that person does retire. Okay. With that said, the current players are not the first, great players who have been criticized regardless of the sport or who are going to be criticized. I mean, you think about it with a guy like Karl Malone. As good as Karl Malone was, he heard it throughout his career as far as not being able to win that championship. Charles Barkley, one of the greatest players ever. Charles heard his fair share of criticism for not being able to win that championship. Okay, and we can go right down the list for every sport. I'll flip sports for you just a minute. Like here, Eli Manning. Okay, he came to the Giants. It was a scenario where some people were always critical of him due to the fact that he was Peyton's little brother. The Giants traded up to the first spot to get a lot for him. And it was always that, yeah, but then when he won a Super Bowl, when he won a championship, he was kind of like, you know what, welcome to this exclusive club. So with that
Right.
said, you know, the media, especially with whatever market that you play in, they're always going to be more critical of you. Boston, New York, Philadelphia, Dallas, LA, certain markets, especially with certain teams, they're going to be more critical of you. I think what has hurt a guy like LeBron, from this aspect is, and I don't know how much of it is like his generation or not, but nonetheless, the whole comparison to Michael Jordan, because I think it's one of those where I have said it before and I will say it again. I think it is one of the stupidest um, debates, in sports history. And we're getting into another one now because now people on in another sport, people want to be up here comparing Patrick Mahomes to Tom Brady, which I think is another stupid comparison. But nonetheless, the whole Jordan, LeBron debate or comparison, which got out of hand during the pandemic, where people are trying to compare and are still trying to compare two different players, two different eras of basketball, two different styles of basketball, two different positions of basketball together. And in the process, I feel like younger generation and current generation, to get their point across about the older generation, they will attempt to diminish, the
Mm-hmm.
accomplishments of those players, making comments like calling them plumbers and such. Okay. And I feel like, the older generation will come across and say, hey, listen, you guys are soft. So there needs to be some type of happy median, if you will, from that aspect. One thing I will say, as far as the face of the NBA, it's something that you have to embrace as a player, and it's one of those where you're not always going to be patted on the back. When things go wrong, you have to step up and accept that. And when I say things go wrong as a great player, when you don't win, okay, you have to embrace the good with the bad. I think one big problem that the NBA currently has is you have a lot of guys, not everybody, but a lot of guys who want to be the guy, but they don't want the responsibility that comes along with being the guy. And I say that from the standpoint, if you're getting a contract and you're getting 30, 40, 50, $60 million a year, a team has invested that money into you for several reasons, for what you're able to do on the court as far as your productivity. But then on top of that, you have become a face of that franchise. You have become a representative of that organization within your community. You have become a representative of that organization on the grand scheme of things, basketball wise. And you have guys out there that do not want to accept that responsibility. Okay, being the face of a franchise, being the face of a league, it's a responsibility, good, bad, and indifferent. And I think too many guys, not all of them, but too many guys, they want to be patted on the back when they're doing great, and they want to be reminded of how great that they are. But at the same time, when things go bad, it's just like, oh, I'm not here for that. And I think that right there is causing a problem as well.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And to your point, I kind of kicked it off with the media thing, and it kind of ties into my point also with what I was saying about back in the day media, where I think they got it wrong. Perfect example. Here is the king of it all of the 90s, Michael Jordan, right? We just were talking about undisputably his era. For whatever reason, the media, they're not going to say everyone, but there's certain members of the media that decided to go on their own witch hunt and journey to tear down this person who was seemingly doing everything correct or doing everything correct, however you want to look at it. This dude, played hard. He won, did everything right as far as obligations on and off the court. Like, did things for children's charities, did everything. He tried not to say anything political or racial so that way he could stay right down the middle and not offend anyone. Like literally tried to do everything right. Still, the media had to find something, and it's his gambling. Okay, the dude makes whatever millions of dollars he made at that time where it happened. Let's call it 10 million, 15 million for on the court stuff. Probably wasn't even that much. And then all his off the court money. And because the dude has a playoff game at MSG tomorrow, he can't go and play some craps the night before. That makes no sense. And I think that kind of started the domino effect of where it has become today, because yes, you do have obligations of doing stuff, but when you do those things and they still want to find something to get at you with, that's a lot to ask a person. And that's kind of where I think LeBron came from with, hey, I've been in this role. It's not all it's cracked up to be. Because here's another guy, LeBron. Dude doesn't do anything wrong. I mean, the only thing, in my opinion, that he does wrong is ask for more help all the time. You know what I mean? Like, other than that, and his occasional flopping and stuff like that. But other than that, like, the dude does nothing wrong. But yet and still, here's the media trying to, you're not Jordan, you're not this, your errors, like just always something with the guy. Like, why can't he just be in his own lane, so to speak? Why can't you just appreciate him for who he is, what he brings to the table? Dude's a great ambassador for the league for the simple fact of you never hear anything about him. And if he does do something about it, he's got the best PR team in the world that's out in front of it, smothering it like a fire, man. So I totally get where he comes from with that, just for the fact of look at it with Jordan. look at the trickle down. It's not all that is worth cracked up that it's worth to be, and that's why I think Ant is kind of like, hey, that's what they got Wimby for, because it's not me.
Listen, I mean, at the end of the day, because you're 100% right, like the old saying goes, man, you got to pay the cost to be the boss. And it's one of those where, I mean, you think about the late, great Kobe Bryant. You see it on podcasts, you see it on social media, and people are talking about how great that Kobe was and Mamba mentality, this, that, and the third. You didn't hear as much of that when Kobe was alive. You heard it, yeah, but you didn't hear as much of that, when played. It's one of those where people really aren't appreciated until they stop doing something. And of course, with LeBron, he's been in the spotlight from the word go because anytime you get a big contract and you haven't directly proven yourself, it's going to raise eyebrows. Even if you have proven yourself and you get that big contract, it's going to raise eyebrows. And the reason why I bring this up, when LeBron, before he even played one minute of basketball in the NBA, he got that $90 million deal from Nike right out of the chute. And of course, the comparisons for Michael Jordan we're going to start right away. And I'm not saying this to blame LeBron, but he didn't do himself any favors by coming out of the chute wearing number 23. Okay. And then not only wearing number 23, but then when he was on the 2004 Olympic team, he wore number 9 as well, a la Michael Jordan. But with that said, it's one of those where it's it's not an easy mantle to carry, regardless of the sport, regardless of who you are. I'll go back another era. You think Muhammad Ali was loved and appreciated? When he was boxing? No, people appreciated Ali more after he stopped. It's a heavy burden, to carry that mantle regardless of that sport, regardless of whatever venue that you are in. And I'm not sure if any of the guys that are in the current NBA are mentally tough enough to go out there and deal with that. And I think that to me is somewhat of an issue that could be facing the NBA. Then on top of that, the media coverage, because I know like that's another factor in it where they're saying like, hey, the guys that cover our sport, they bring so much negativity to it. Well, I can see both sides of that because ratings are down, but the NBA still, lucked out and got that lucrative deal. I think 11 years, 76 billion once you factor in NBC, ESPN, and Amazon to get that new television deal. But the problem is like they're really not helping themselves with the product that is out there. Okay. And it's one of those where some of the guys don't want to hear about the criticism that comes along with it. But yeah, your product overall is not as good as it has been in the past. And it's like there are some NBA games right now that are downright unwatchable. And it doesn't the NBA themselves, they haven't helped this issue when it comes to like the whole load management thing. Guys not really trying hard in the All Star game. And of course, they're not the only league that has had that issue. I mean, we've seen the NFL scrap the Pro Bowl altogether, the Pro Bowl games, which is a joke in itself. But nonetheless, I think it's one of those where you've got to really embrace it. You've got to really want it. And I think you have to accept the good and the bad that comes along with it. I don't think there's a lot of guys out there that are willing to do that. I think media coverage aside, I think the whole social media aspect has a lot to do with that as well. Because at the end of the day, social media has become a voice of the voiceless in some cases. And it's one of those where, you know, you got to deal with the idiot's opinion. Sometimes, like, there's a lot of truth telling on social media, there's a lot of truth telling on the internet as well. But you also have to deal with the idiot factor. And, a lot of these guys, they have social media accounts and whether it's TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, whatever it is, and then they deal with the good interactions with the fans, but they also deal with the negative interactions because guys, can hide behind a screen and think that they could say whatever they want to a person about a person's family, which at the end of the day is just flat out disgusting because I feel like the people who are going online to critique these guys and hide behind a screen are gutless because at the end of the day, half of those guys are the same people that if they saw them in person, they'd be asking for an autograph or they would think twice about getting up in somebody's face when you think about it, when you're talking about somebody who's like 6'7", 6'8", 260, 275 pounds and would knock you into the middle of the next week, if they had to. So I think all of those things are factoring in, and I'm really not sure if anybody's ready to step up and embrace that role.
Well, see, I'm going to play devil's advocate here, and I don't think it's necessarily that they don't possess the mentality to want to do that. I think these cats are wired different. And what I mean by that is this. Perfect example is Kevin Durant. Old school basketball, normally your best player on your team is your leader. There are
Right,
certain
right.
situations where there's somebody else that may be your vocal leader,
Hmm.
but there's like the best player is your leader that everyone follows. Kevin Durant, you know, and this is no disrespect to him, he is who he is. Dude's a great all-time scorer, one of the best scorers ever to play the game, easily going to be first ballot Hall of Fame, all of that, list goes on and on. But the dude not only is the best player on pretty much any team he's ever played on that you throw him on, but he doesn't want to not only be the voice of the team, but he doesn't want to be the leader at all. He's like, just let me ball, just let me do my thing. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Like that's him. But I think now you've got the younger generation coming up, and you listen to a lot of people talk about people like who their goat is, so to speak. The younger kids, the younger players playing, and a lot of them say Kevin Durant. So a lot of them are like, this is my guy. Anthony Edwards, perfect example. Kevin Durant, he said it was his guy. So they're going to be wired, kind of, so to speak, to have that similar mentality. So I don't think it's that they can't do it or anything like that. I think it's like, hey, well, it worked for the dude who I admire the most in this sport, and he's going to go down as what he goes down as. So maybe that's the lane for me too. So I'm not saying that that's necessarily a problem that they're causing, but I definitely see how it can lead to a bigger issue because there's still, at the end of the day, got to be someone who wants the job. And that's the thing. Like Mike wanted the job because Mike knew with the job came, Mike just wanted to be the best. And he knew the best was supposed to have that job. The
Right.
way these guys, I think, are looking at it now is I can still be the best on the court and not have to deal with everything else that goes along with it. And also, like, I don't know, Mike's just, if you think about the commercials that he was in back then, he didn't say much. They had other people around him doing the talking, doing the promoting, so to speak. Look no more than Mr. Mars Blackman himself. You know, so it wasn't really Mike pushing the stuff. It was just letting Mike be Mike and just being that image of Mike that we knew as being almost perfect,
Right.
and just letting him operate that. As to now, to your point with social media, we have so much more of these people's personality just right there at our fingertips.
Right.
So with that, now you can't just have someone just saying, standing, this is the physique of a, perfect person, and let's have this charismatic celebrity endorse the product. Now the athletes kind of have to endorse it themselves a little bit more, which is even crazier slippery slope to now trickle down because, well, what happens if Your Instagram live is going at the wrong time. Now your everything is screwed for 6 months, six
Yeah,
years. Who knows? Like just it's so much more of a mixed bag now.
yeah,
And I think so much has now fallen out of that bag that, it's like, when you're taking the trash out, and we've all been there where we slip up
right,
and the bag breaks or something falls out the top and we try to get it back in and now everything's out. Like now it's too late and we kind of can be at that point. And what's really catastrophic about it, it's kind of perfect timing with the NBA securing that television deal when they did, because it's going to be able to not have a major effect right away. But
right.
what could be catastrophic is if this continues and it just continues to snowball like this, the time that comes for the next re-up, oh man, now we might be in trouble because now NBA viewership might be lower than it already is because the game's continuing not to give people what they're asking for, what they need, what they want. It's something that we're missing. It's not just you, it's not just me. The viewers are speaking, and
Right.
it's something that's missing. So unless they can kind of figure something out, it's going to be a huge problem. And then I'm going to go back to a point you made about like Ali. Ali, I think the turning point for Ali was the Foreman fight. That's the one where he really became like the people's champion, so to speak. And a lot of the reason that he wasn't embraced kind of from the beginning is because, again, the US media can be when they want to be. And, look no further than Craig Hodges on that one.
Yeah, listen, listen. I mean, Craig Hodges is a prime example. It's just one of those where it's just like they they could turn on you, in a New York minute, so to speak. I mean, I think from a New York standpoint, I think about Alex Rodriguez and Derek Jeter, two great players, but A-Rod wasn't fully embraced by the Yankee fans for all of those years that he played until they won a championship in 2009. And of course, he got World Series MVP. And A-Rod, the only mistake that A-Rod made up until that point was the fact that, hey, he signed that 10-year, $252 million deal, which was like way out of the water at the time, to play for the Texas Rangers. And it's one of those where it's like, if they're offering it to you, I mean, shoot, are you not going to take it? Okay. And, it's just sometimes, again, I think it goes back into that narrative, you got to pay the cost to be the boss. Anytime that you have a scenario where you're the highest paid player on your team. You're the highest paid player at your position, in a sport. You're the highest paid player, in a sport, period. There's going to be, some responsibility that comes along with it. I think about, Formula One. In most of the 2010s, that decade was dominated by Lewis Hamilton. Why? Because nobody won, more Formula One championships during that time than he did. And it's just even to this day, only him. No, nobody's technically won more F1 titles than Lewis Hamilton. He's tied with the great Michael Schumacher for the most. But the thing is like he basically became the face of that sport. And it's one of those good and bad because he's faced a lot of criticism for things. He's been given a lot of credit, at the same time. And it's just like, but I feel like good and bad, you've got to embrace it because at the end of the day, none of us are going to be able to please everybody. Okay. There's people out there right now that know us, that don't like us. There's people out there right now who don't know us and they don't like us. Okay. And it's one of those where, you know, listen, we're growing YouTube channels. There are people out there who have much bigger, reaches on YouTube than we do. And if you've got a million, followers out there on YouTube, yeah, you're going to get some positive feedback, on your shorts. You're going to get some positive feedback on your posts, on your lives, and all other stuff. But guess what? You got to deal with the negative stuff as well. You got to deal with the stupidity as well. And there's a price that comes along with all of that. And I think, for these guys, I think there is some truth. behind what they're saying and how they're feeling, by it. But at the same time, I'm like, you know what? You still got to grow a little thicker skin from the standpoint that, hey, you know what? You can only control what you're going to control. Because I feel like if you go out there and score 30 points and have 12 rebounds and have 7 assists and your team wins by 2 points, okay, there's going to be some people to praise you, and rightfully so. There's always going to be critics as well. Listen, I guarantee you right now, there's some people that just saw the Philadelphia Eagles win the Super Bowl last month. And I guarantee you there's some people who feel like, you know what, they weren't the best team in the NFL this season. Okay, I'm not one of those people, but there's always going to be people out there critiquing you. And just like when the Super Bowl just wrapped up, just like when, the national championship in college football just wrapped up 2 months ago. There's already people out there in the media. Okay, who's the favorite to win the championship next year? It's like you want to get off of this person, you want to get off of this team so quick because they want to be on to something else. But like I said before, people are just going to be people.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of those where, and I hate to sound like a broken record, good, bad, and indifferent, you got to deal with it. I mean, a guy like LeBron, he's probably got 2 more years left in the NBA. And now with the gift of Luka Doncic, because that's exactly what it was, he has a legit opportunity to possibly get a fifth championship ring. If that is the case, there's going to be people that praise LeBron, and there's still going to be people who will discredit that.
Mm-hmm.
At this point in the game, if you're LeBron, you're not going to please those people.
Mm-hmm.
So why even bother? But I think again, too many podcasts, too many stuff, too many things on social media as far as like, trying to compare LeBron to Jordan has not helped things. You know, then trying to compare guys from one era to another era. Listen, it's it's a different game. It's saying, oh, the older guys win last in our league. Older guys saying the younger guys win last in our league. Listen, are there truths for both of those things? Absolutely. But it's one of those where leave it alone. You have to embrace who somebody is, but I feel like some of these younger guys are saying it and not really giving like, respect to the vets, the guys who like paved the way for them, I think, is not helping the situation. And again, not to sound like I'm going off on a tangent or anything like that, but it's just one of those simple things where you can't you can't want credit when things are going good, and then when things are going bad, well, don't ask me, ask somebody else. And that's why, for a guy like KD, I mean, okay, he doesn't want to be the leader, but you're getting leader type money. You know what I'm saying? And it's like guys are looking at you to go out there and make that big play. So you might not want to be the leader, but you have to be the leader. You have to embrace all that comes with that. It's like, listen, you want the ball in your hands in those key scenarios. And it's not just wanting the ball in somebody's hands. You want to take that, their best player at the other end of the floor. And this is why I think some people were looking at Ant-Man, because if you go back to last year's playoff run that the Timberwolves had when they got to the Western Conference Finals, basically when they played the Suns, he was like, "Yo, I want KD," and KD didn't fare as great when Ant Man was guarding him. It was the same thing when the Timberwolves beat the Nuggets, and then of course, finally when the Timberwolves got to the Western Conference Finals, and Ant Man was feeling himself, and he was like, "I want Kyrie." We saw what happened. But nonetheless, Ant Man, was willing to embrace that. And I think that is why a lot of people gravitated to him on that. It's one of those where I think the NBA has a very interesting situation coming forth, because a lot of the guys that we mentioned previously, and I'll let you allude to this now if you want to come back to it later, that's all good, but a lot of the guys that we talked about, as far as like potentially being the new face of the NBA, a lot of those guys were not born in the United States. My question to you is, can the NBA, you know, and I know it's a global sport, yes, but can they go forward with having a face or faces of the NBA being born outside of the U.S.?
I think they absolutely can, and I think it'll just continue to grow the game. I think the problem is kind of like what I pointed out earlier. I think it's the U.S. media. I think it's the U.S. media being territorial and not allowing these global superstars to fully take on the responsibility of what they should be. I mean, here it's all about the best players, and we can't help it that right now the top guys were all born out of this country, even including SGA from Canada.
Right.
So there's nothing that can be done about that. You can't go back 20, 25 years ago and move some DNA around
Right.
and make it something different. Like, so the US media has to be more allowing of these players. And another point that, think about this, right? And it just kind of hit me here. So, a lot of these players, from the US, we grow up hearing about, whether it be, especially nowadays, AAU, ESPN does their high school showcases. Obviously, the monster that college basketball is. We know backstories on these players. These guys coming from overseas, unless they spend a year in the NC2A, we don't know anything about him. It's
Right.
just, oh, here's some random YouTube highlights about this dude when he gets drafted. Take Joker, perfect example, way low in the first round, and then all of a sudden now,
Second round.
second round, right? Now all of a sudden he's, the best player in the league. Like, we don't get a chance to grow with them. So I think that's a problem too. I think maybe the US media, and this is something that I don't even know if it's possible, but maybe we do a better job of covering these guys from younger ages who they think it's a possibility. Like, look, if this dude is on Fran Fraschiller's list of somebody to watch out for, or Jonathan Givony, if these guys are talking about him, maybe let's show some more highlights of him from, a sports center point of view or something else. I don't know, but it's got to be maybe a joint effort there to get more awareness to these guys. So that way, when they come in the league, we're a little bit more invested. Cooper Flag, we all know who that dude is.
Right.
Everyone's invested in him. So, he's already kind of got a story going forward to where if he takes off rookie year, then, we know. Wemby is the exception of that. We got highlights of him. We got a taste of, what he had to offer from a very early age, so to speak, in his basketball career. But the norm is not there when it comes to that. So I think the US media has to reposition how they deliver what they're supposed to for us to really get behind these guys a little bit earlier. Think about it. Like, we're getting behind these guys when they're already 25 plus, asking them to now play this role that they didn't even know really existed because they're not even from here.
Right.
So I think that's a huge problem with that there. Another thing, the hugest problem, and you kind of said something. This was actually going to be my next point. You kind of said something, and I'm like, okay, we're on to something here. So in every other sport, it's defined what the role has to be in order to be the face of the league. Let's start with the NFL. Normally, the face of the league is not necessarily the best player in the league, but it's probably the quarterback that's winning the most Super Bowls or getting to the most consecutive appearances, like constantly is relevant on that type of level. That's usually the face of the NFL. That's defined 100%. Baseball, the face of baseball is usually a combination of the best player, and you have to have some type of personality. If you have no personality and you're the best player, there's no way that you're really the face of baseball. For some reason, it's just that combination when it comes to that. Hockey, face of the league, usually the best player, 100% definitive. When it comes to the NBA, for whatever reason, the role is not defined like that. The role is defined as chasing the ghost. The role is defined as, is this player Michael Jordan or better? That's the face of the league. It's not, it's a moving target. And that, again, I believe is the media's fault for making it this moving target. It's not a definitive thing. It's not what we know. You can't make the face of the league be the next Michael Jordan. What if there never will be another Michael Jordan? Then that means to tell me there will never be another definitive face of the NBA because there's always trios and quintuplets and things like that. So I think that right there is a problem that so many people, it's like it has to be uncovered. You got to dig through some rocks and really realize, oh shit, that really is a problem.
Yeah, to your point about the media, and you had me think for a minute, and sports are entertainment, no pun intended, because we just talked about that. Uh, but it's one of those where I feel like sometimes the coverage of it goes too far, and especially nowadays, with social media. And the reason why I think about it is this: you go back to when LeBron first went to Miami, with him, Wade, and Bosh, and of course, the decision, we're gonna win, not one, not two, not three, all of that stuff. Okay. So they did get to the finals, their first year, and they lost to Dallas. And, of course, they have ESPN ABC had that camera, set up in the hallway, as the Heat were walking back to their locker room after they lost game six and lost the championship. And basically, Chris Bosh collapsed. And it's one of those where I feel like, the viewing public did not need to see that. Okay, because it's not on the playing field, it's, a private moment. And, in sports, there's always going to be moments of, there's always highs and lows of sports. And, I feel like, you're trying to capture a little bit too much and get guys in the emotion. And, again, those are private moments that you're trying to put out there. When Kawhi hit that shot back in 2019 when he actually still played basketball and, to knock off the Sixers in a game seven. And then, of course, Joel Embiid, got mocked and probably still gets mocked, okay, for when they called him, in the, like going to the locker room, and he was crying and stuff like that. And it's one of those where, again, those are private moments that the media is just trying to capture. And I'm just saying it from the standpoint that, to your point, is whenever these guys are going to go this far to show the negative, it's going to make these guys less and less um hungry to step up to the plate and be like, hey, I want to deal with this. Because I mean, typically whenever there's a winner and a loser in sports, like especially like a big series, big championship game, whatever it is, naturally the team that won, they're, they're on the court, they're on the field, they're celebrating. Usually, the losing team is given a little bit of time, as far as, to gather themselves, get composure and stuff like that. Because at the end of the day, there are emotions, that need to be let out. But I think the media nowadays, they just want to capture every moment. Prime example, it's like you think about senior night, whether it's high school or college, and it's just like those are special moments for both, for all of those guys and gals because that's their last moment. But some of those moments, should be private. What I'm saying? The world doesn't need to see it. And I think, to your point, the media coverage had on a lot of things has basically just simply been oversaturated. And to your point, that's probably helping these guys, to feel the way that they feel about these things.
Think about this, right? Like, so when you were just speaking, I just remembered about, let's go even before, Michael Jordan. And this is just the classic American tale of America will build you up just to tear you down. Is a young Magic Johnson, going through things that young athletes do. And now all of a sudden his name is Tragic Johnson. And that right there might have been like to my recollection, like the first time where the media took like blatant shots at a player because of something they did in the game, and the game didn't come out to the outcome that they thought it would be. And
Right.
now all of a sudden, let's take these type of shots. And ever since then, the U.S. media in particular has armed themselves with more and more ammo to just take shots at people. Oh, a guy had 34 points, 9 rebounds, 7 assists, a couple of turnovers. Yeah, but it was his fault they didn't lose. How is it his fault? Unless he went out there and like blatantly did something like J.R. Smith game 1 NBA finals, like to
Right.
determine the game. How is it that dude's fault? He clearly did everything. They will find every reason. Give blame when it's time to give blame. Give credit when it's time to give credit. And when it's not time to give blame, don't find a reason to just keep the 24-hour news cycle going. Give it a rest a little, you know?
And and to your point about Magic, Magic had already become a two-time NBA champion by the time that 82 was over. Okay, but it was still one of those where they hadn't faced off against the Celtics yet. They finally faced the Celtics in 84. The Celtics won that series. So it was like, oh, you can't get over the hump. Yeah, you're a two-time champion. But okay, so there's always like for a lot of people, um, there's always going to be that, yeah, but I mean, switching sports, you look at Tom Brady, seven-time Super Bowl champion. No players won more championships than Tom Brady. 10 Super Bowl appearances. But, for all of that's worth, you're still going to have people that will say, you know what? He never beat Eli Manning and the Giants, in the Super Bowl. Some people are always going,
Joe Montana was 4-0.
right.
Like it's
Yeah.
all something. Yeah.
There's always going to be something. I mean, for a guy like LeBron, I think at the end of the day, and it's not going to be today or tomorrow, like a day or two after his career is over, I think that he will be remembered as like a four-time champion or maybe a five-time champion potentially. But I mean, I look at a guy like Dr. J. Dr. J won an NBA championship. He also lost in the NBA finals three times. Okay. But, history now that it's been so many years later, people only talk about the one championship that Dr. J won. And I'm not saying only one, to try to diminish it because winning championships are not easy. John Elway. John Elway had three of the most horrific performances in Super Bowl history, his first three times around with the Denver Broncos. But at the end of the day, what do people talk about the most? The last two performances that John Elway had to finish his career in the NFL, where he and the Broncos won, consecutive championships. And of course, John Elway is remembered as a two-time champion. Again, at the end of the day, like I said before, people are not truly appreciated until their respective careers are over. And I think too often, like you said, the media tries to put a mantle on somebody who's the next guy, who's the next this, who's the next that. I think back to Michael Jordan pre, retirement for baseball, where people were like, "Oh, this guy's the next Jordan," or like Harold Miner, they were calling
Right.
him baby Jordan, and it's like no disrespect to Harold Miner. Harold Miner did not have the game of a Michael Jordan. He had the hops too, you know what I'm saying? And of course,
And a bald head, and that was it.
yeah, and he made listen those two dunk contests that he entered, were phenomenal. All right, but it's just one of those where sometimes there's a tough act to follow. That's all it is. I think back and I'm just off the top of my head. I think back to the 2000 slam dunk contest. Any other year, Steve Francis or Tracy McGrady could have won that contest. But it was just the fact that, hey, all Vince Carter had to do was show up and he was going to win. Now, of course, Vince Carter helped that situation with what he did that night. But, again, the dunk contest, for an example, when you have a great dunk contest, it's very difficult to go out there and follow it up the next year. You think about that dunk off that we saw with Zach LaVine and Aaron Gordon from about 10 years ago. it was the dunk contest was lame after that for a couple of years until we
Mm-hmm.
got back into rhythm. It was the same thing when Vince won it in 2000. You name it, we can go right down the list. So sometimes you have tough acts to follow, and I mean late '90s, early 2000s. It's like even as great as the Laker dynasty was at that point, it still wasn't MJ. Okay, so it's like because MJ was still fresh in people's minds, and like again, not trying to sound like a broken record, but it's one of those with these guys. Listen, people are going to be critical of you regardless. People are going to praise you regardless. Embrace all of it. It's part of the journey. You know what I'm saying? Take the negativity and just go out there and simply make yourself better. Not because you're trying to prove them wrong. Just you got something to prove to yourself. Okay. And just keep, adding, to your following that is out there. But I think at the end of the day, just, I don't I just don't see a guy that's ready to step up and embrace being the face of the NBA. It's something that I cannot say in regards to the NFL, Major League Baseball, uh, or the National Hockey League. I think they have their faces, in place. I mean, for so many years in hockey, it was Ovi and Sid the Kid, and now we've got Austin Matthews and we've got Connor McDavid, or as you call him, Connor McJesus. You know what I'm saying? For so many years in the NFL, you had Peyton Manning, you had Drew Brees, you had Tom Brady, you had Aaron Rodgers, and Pat Mahomes has basically stepped up and said, you know what? Y'all cool out. I got this. You know what I'm saying? And it's one of those where like if a Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson can get over that hump in January against a Pat Mahomes, they'll be right there with him. You know what I'm saying? Major League Baseball, you've got Shohei. And it's so amazing that with Shohei just going from Anaheim to Los Angeles, because I know that they call themselves LA just like to get off of that, to like to delve into that media market, but the Angels are Anaheim. Okay. Some people might disagree with me. That's all good. But just by him going from Anaheim to LA, and this is not even with him winning the World Series, look at how much more media attention that Shohei got. Okay. Shohei is one of the faces of baseball.
He is
Okay.
the face.
The only
He's
other
the
guy,
face.
the
Like
only
you
other,
can't. I wouldn't argue that.
the only other guy that I'm putting in that conversation is Bryce Harper. You know what I'm saying? I could have said Mike. I could have said Mike Trout before, but unfortunately for Mike Trout, the injuries have gotten the best of him. But
I
it's
would
just
say
like,
Mike Trout was previously, and I
yeah,
honestly think the reason that he never took over is his lack of personality. And I
yeah,
think that Otani is a godsend to baseball. Like they're like, thank God, because he not only backs it up on the field, but he has personality.
yeah,
Even though the dude doesn't speak much English, you can just get the vibe from him. You know,
yeah,
he's just seems like a good guy. Him and his dog are always freaking hilarious. Anytime I see something about that, like
yeah,
he just seems like a personality. And that's what I was saying earlier. Like with baseball, it's just something about it's a combination of being one of the better. You don't have to be the best player per se, but
right,
one of the best players, and you have to have that personality. Now that they have the unquestionable best player and he's filled with personality, baseball's loving this right now, and they're going to see a little bit of a resurgence back into the ballpark and into relevancy over the next half a decade to a decade because of Otani.
yeah,
That's why the NBA's got it. They've got to change the way how they look at their guy because it's too hard to define. Like you can argue Derek Jeter was at no point in time was ever the best player in baseball, but he was the face of baseball back then because of that combination of things.
and 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 and,
Every
and
yeah,
playing in New York and playing for the Yankees didn't
and
hurt either.
winning championships.
Right,
That like it was that combination of things. Like every sport has their defined kind of what it is. The
right,
NBA's literally is who's the next Jordan? That's going to be the face of the league. Who's the next Jordan? That's going to be. And again, when the target is not, if I can't go home, think about this like on any level. If you're given an assignment and your assignment is A, B, and C, and you definitively know what you're trying to do to accomplish that role, it's a lot easier than just saying, "Oh, just be that guy." You know?
Yeah, listen, I mean, you know, you got to check the boxes and you've got to embrace it. And I just, I'm just thinking off the top of my head. It's going to have to be a face, by committee until, they figure out something else. And it might be a scenario where, you think about in another light, you think about pro wrestling. And of course, if you thought about pro wrestling 1980s, who was the face of pro wrestling in the 1980s? Hulk Hogan.
Dude, you're reading my mind.
Okay.
Like we're here right now,
Right.
and let's
Right.
go. Let's go.
And of course, Hulkamania got old, early 90s and steroids, all of that stuff. It took them some years, like several years, before, The Rock and Stone Cold, brought it back. And then of course you were off to the races. I think that's something where the NBA is gonna have to deal with. And maybe, just maybe, because like I said, LeBron's probably got 2 more years in him at this point. Steph Curry's probably got maybe 3 or 4 more years on him. KD's probably got like 3 or 4 more years in him. Maybe, between now and then, you know, they could they could like remedy their issue, and who knows? I mean, let's just say for an example, you get Celtics Lakers, in the NBA Finals this year. And of course, if that's the case, that's the NBA's wet dream, as far as having Celtics Lakers. Let's say you have the Celtics beat the Lakers, just throwing it out there, okay? So now you've got a two-time champion in both Jason Tatum and Jalen Brown. That could, maybe push the needle a little bit. All right. Um, but like overall, I just don't see, another guy that, is ready to really just step up and embrace that. And I think the NBA has to accept that. And I think they will. And I think what they need to do is, push these stars that they do have. Another issue that I do think has hindered the NBA in this whole thing. Very, I get it, and I'm not trying to, you got small market teams and they need to compete as well. I totally understand it. But typically, you have your best players in the biggest markets. And I think, maybe something like that, getting more of your stars in a bigger market. Also, having a team or having a guy that you either want to see win or you want to see fail. Because again, sports are entertainment. We talked about
Mhm.
this. Okay. And I think outside of LeBron right now, I really don't see a guy in the NBA that people want to see lose. That's going to captivate them, as far as tuning in. So you have to give them a story. You know what I'm saying? To basically you have to have somebody, a guy or a team that what, okay, if that game's starting at 7 o'clock, you're home by 7 o'clock. You're at
Mhm.
a bar. You got your phone. You're watching your phone on the way home. Okay, trying to see what's going on with that game. And I think that is a narrative that the NBA is missing right now. I
Big
think
time.
back, yeah, I think back to the 1980s, 3:30 on a Sunday afternoon. If CBS was showing Lakers and Celtics, everybody was there. I think back to the 1990s. Okay, a lot of guys would go hang out and play ball on Sundays. If that Knicks Bulls game was coming on 3:30 Eastern or 6 o'clock Eastern, guess what? The park was empty by 5:30. Everybody
Hmm.
was going home, getting a bite to eat. Yo, we want to see Jordan.
Hmm.
Okay, you don't have that scenario right now, and I mean, you figure the NBA, they're giving you a doubleheader almost every Sunday now on ESPN. They're giving you, your Thursday night doubleheaders on TNT, and like they're giving you, some Saturday evening games on ABC as well. But they don't have that guy that you want to see win or lose. Okay, as far as like you want to really gravitate to them, and I think that is something that could definitely help them as well. I really do, you mentioned Cooper Flag before. I really do want to see, who drafts him. Because I think the kid has talent. And I,
Mhm.
and, you know, and I really want to see what team he goes to, and maybe he could become a potential budding star for the NBA as well. But I just don't simply see one guy who's ready to go out there and embrace this thing.
Here's the thing too that's really interesting. Like if you think about this, so you got a guy, and I mentioned his name when I mentioned the five, people who I think are probably considered the faces of the league going forward. And one, he's one of the only two American-born players. Two, unlike the other American-born player that I mentioned, Anthony Edwards, he actually wants to smoke, and that's Jason Tatum. And I saw something where he basically came out and was like, all right, well, let's talk about face of the league. Well, what about me? Why don't I get mentioned? Here it is, NBA champion, best player on his team, plays in a major market, multiple time All Star, multiple time All NBA first team player. And he's like 26 years old.
Well,
And he wants it. And I don't know. Like that's the crazy thing that I don't get is like here's a guy that kind of checks a lot of boxes. Not
hmm
the best player. I don't think anybody walking earth that talks basketball is going to tell you he's the best player in the league.
hmm
But he checks so many boxes and he wants it, and they don't want to give him any part of it. So that's like they're looking for something too specific.
Well, I could see where like you're looking for something too specific, but I will say this though, because I'm gonna touch on all of that. With Jason Tatum, I mean, we have seen him in more commercials this year since the Celtics won the NBA championship with SoFi. He's already in those commercials with NBC. Now that they're going to get their coverage of the NBA back and stuff like that. And again, like you said, iconic franchise, big market. He checks all the boxes. I think people would rather sit down and watch Jason Tatum play than watch Jason Tatum play. And that's no disrespect to Jason Tatum because
Right.
the guy can ball. And I think that's what it comes down to. You gotta have a,
Personality.
a personality, and you've gotta have, somebody that people gravitate to. I think about boxing for a moment, and I
So
think,
wait, real quick before you go to boxing, that's
mhm,
the problem with him. I think is Deuce is known for his personality more than his dad is.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Like there's got to be something there that makes you stand out. With LeBron, you knew from day one the sheer athleticism that he was bringing to the table. Okay, and then of course, some of his great playoff, performances. First time around with Cleveland. Okay, we know about everything else. Steph Curry, what he's brought to the table and continues to bring to the table are the trick shots. And it's just like it's one of those where like sometimes if Steph hits one or two shots early, you got to sit down and get a bite to eat because you're like, you know what, this might be a 60-point night here. You know what I'm saying? With a guy like Tatum, and I think Jason Tatum is a phenomenal basketball player. He doesn't like push the needle, if you will, from the entertainment value. It's like a guy like the comparison I was gonna make to boxing. You think about a guy like Mike Tyson, okay, and you know where I'm going with this. Back in the day, because it was true. If you were going to somebody's crib to watch a Tyson fight, you better be there by the time he leaves the dressing room. Why? Because if you're like, you know what, I'm gonna get there by the second or third round.
So,
If you do, you're gonna see highlights. That's it. You know what I'm
so
saying? But the thing was, Mike Tyson was Mike Tyson because people showed up to watch a Tyson fight because they knew somebody was gonna get their ass whooped that night and he was gonna drop somebody.
right.
So you gotta give people something from the entertainment value. And I think it's one of those where I don't see a current guy like pushing the needle on that. It was like a guy like Magic. You watch Magic because Magic would bring that ball up, and you never knew where Magic was going. with that basketball. And it was like, listen, that Showtime, I think the Showtime Lakers were perfect for that city because it was in the shadows of Hollywood and they were entertainment. But the
That
thing is,
picture,
yeah,
you know what picture I'm talking about.
yeah.
There is nothing more iconic than that picture of Magic walking into the old school forum with Michael Jackson,
Oh,
Nicholson.
when he had the
Um,
when he had the fur coat on. Yeah,
yeah, I
yeah, yeah,
mean,
yeah,
the dude just commanded presence.
yeah, yeah. You know what I'm saying? So there has to be, an entertainment, aspect to it. It's just like, getting back to the faces of the NFL. You know, you think back to like when Brett Favre played in the 90s. It was
Mm-hmm.
like, yo, you were like, oh, okay. 2 minutes, the Packers are down by four. I gotta see this. When the Niners played, in the 80s, it was like, yo, okay, yo, Joe Montana's got the ball. All right, bet we gotta watch this. And it's like, when you knew Tom Brady and the Patriots, were gonna do something special, dude, you sat down and watched. And it's like the same thing with Mahomes right now. And I guarantee you, with the sticking with the president as far as the NFL goes, it's kind of like what are the like law of averages without me even looking at the stats. I guarantee you, like most of the highest rated games this past season, as far as viewership went, had to involve the Chiefs, and it was like
Absolutely.
one. It was one of those. It's like sure, there were plenty of people who wanted to see the Chiefs win and become the first team to win three straight Super Bowls. But I guarantee you, there were a lot of people out there that wanted to see the Chiefs lose. And for those people who wanted to see the Chiefs lose, they got their money's worth and then some.
Right.
Last month in the Super Bowl, a guy like Jason Tatum, unfortunately, as good as he is, he doesn't push the needle. In that aspect, and I think all of that, goes into it.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you made a point, really good about maybe 10, 15 minutes ago, specifically in regards to the NBA, doesn't have enough heels. Like
Yeah,
faces and heels is within every fashion of life.
yeah,
And it's kind of what tells the story of balance.
yeah.
And without that, things fall out of place. With no balance, things literally fall out of place.
Listen,
So,
like not to cut you, but I'll say this: you think about the Bulls, okay, when Mike was there. That second three-peat was watched more than the first three-peat. Granted, people wanted to see, Mike get over that hump, get the championship. People still watch that Jordan, the first three-peat. Don't get me wrong, but that second Bulls team were rock stars because you had the different personalities. You had the stoic Michael Jordan, who was always about business. And then you had Dennis Rodman. And then you're like,
Godzilla.
well, how is Phil Jackson going to keep all of this together? And then you had, Mr. Smooth, Scottie Pippen. And then you had a guy like Tony Kukoc, who people were basically calling the European Michael Jordan. So it's
Mm-hmm.
like, yo, how is all of this going to work? But at the end of the day, it was entertainment. You think back to Mike's last season with the Bulls. I think they set a record at the Georgia Dome
Yeah,
for the most watched game. I think they put 65 or
it was almost
66,000,
70,000.
yeah, in an arena to watch basketball. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
not a football game, basketball. All right, so you're talking about you were in the nosebleeds of the nosebleeds just to say, you know what? I got to see Michael Jordan's last game in Atlanta with the Bulls.
Right.
All right. So there's nobody again that's really pushing that needle like that currently in the NBA. I mean, if LeBron wanted to do a farewell tour, you could do something like that. If Steph Curry wanted to do a farewell tour right now, you could do something like that. But there's not a lot of other guys out there that
Those are the only two.
yeah, because it's like, listen, you look at some of the last couple of teams that have won championships in the NBA. You got the Celtics, Jason Tatum and Jalen Brown. No disrespect, they don't have those personalities like that are going to captivate people.
Mm-hmm.
You look at the Nuggets. As good and as bad as the Joker is, all right, people aren't going to want to sit up there. The casual fan, at least, they're not going to. Okay, What's Joker
Go,
going to do, do tonight? Same
yeah.
thing with the Bucks with Giannis and so many others.
Well, look
So
at his personality too with
yeah,
Joker. Like he's not going to give you anything in the interview. Like
no,
you're going to look for something to want to gravitate towards him too, and he's going to talk about his horses.
yeah, and listen, I'm not knocking him,
Right?
okay,
Not at all.
because that is who he is. It's like for every for every Roy Jones, for every Muhammad Ali, you got a Larry Holmes. Okay. And
Right.
at the end of the day, or Marvin Hagler, and they're gonna go out there and take care of their business. And I think, going old school for a minute, I always feel this fight went the wrong way. I feel like that worked against Marvin Hagler when he fought Sugar Ray. Because Marvin
Yeah.
Hagler was always stoic. He was about
It
business.
turned him into something different. Like
Right.
or people's perception, I should say.
Exactly. And of course, a
Mm-hmm.
guy like Sugar Ray was a people's champion.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? So all of that, factors in. So I mean, I'm looking at it, and I think they do have an issue with that.
Yeah.
I truly do, but I think that Adam Silver and the NBA are smart enough to roll with the punches for now. However, I will say this though: when that new media deal does begin next year,
That's going to be the problem.
I guarantee you that Amazon, NBC, ESPN, they're going to sit down and they're going to talk turkey with the NBA, and like they probably have already started to talk turkey as far as like, hey, who are we going to push? Who are we going to do this, that, and the third with? X, Y, and Z. So it's one of those where I think everybody involved needs to put their thinking caps on for this.
No, but here's the bigger problem, and this is what I was saying a little while ago. To your point earlier, they
Hmm.
don't even have heel teams.
No,
If you don't even have heel teams, you have an even bigger issue. Think about it in football. You can just go to a decade and you can pick the heel team in every freaking decade. Let's go back to the 70s
the
with the
Raiders
Steelers.
and the
Well, I
Raiders.
would I would say the Steelers because they were winning and
Yeah.
people America to build up to tear you down. They don't. Hey, it's cool you win one time. All right, you win twice. Yeah. Wait a minute, you win three, four times now. We don't like you now.
Plus,
Like we don't want to see you win anymore.
plus they beat the Cowboys, during
Right,
that era.
right. You go to the 80s, 49ers. You go to the 90s. The Cowboys for the first part of the decade, and then they kind of dropped
They
off.
right.
And then the NFL had a little bit of a problem where they didn't have anything for a while until the Patriots came along.
Yeah.
And then the Patriots were the heel forever. And then it became Tom Brady became the biggest heel.
Right.
So he could take his show to Tampa and now make them the heel. And now KC is without question the heel.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
there's constantly been that, hey, guess what? If my team is out of it, no matter what, I still have a rooting interest because I hate you guys.
Yeah.
Basketball has nothing that exists like that. In my opinion, the reason why they have nothing that exists like that, when's the last basketball dynasty truly been? Maybe if you want to call them the early 2000s Spurs, maybe if you want to call that a dynasty. The
I guess
Warriors, yes and no, because how can you hate Steph Curry? The Warriors won, but they didn't win at a ridiculously consistent clip. They got a couple of chunks here and there. But then
hmm
again, here it is, the face of the team looks like he could be your kid brother or your kid himself. How is
well,
he gonna be this big bad heel? You know what I mean? Like
I
the
mean,
NBA hasn't had a heel team in so long.
that's why, like, a lot of people refer to and still do refer to Steph as the babyface assassin.
Yeah,
You know what I'm saying?
yeah,
Listen, I remember when Mike Epps was getting at Steph at his own comedy show, and he basically was like he's running around out there like a 10-year-old because he really does. But the thing is, it's like I think Golden State was probably the closest thing to it, and here's why: because I think Golden State was embraced, their first championship with Cleveland when they beat Cleveland. And I think because you had people out there that did not want to see LeBron win. So they became the faces of it. All right. And then, of course, LeBron and Cleveland, they had that comeback. from the following year. And I think at that point, Golden State had already started to become the villains because they went 73-9 during the regular season. And I think it only got magnified the following year when we saw KD, join up with them. So you had that. And by the time that, that Golden State run was done, when they lost to Toronto, when both KD and Clay got hurt, I think people were happy to see Golden State lose because I think they had a little, warrior burnout, if you will, at that point. But I think they got embraced again when they came back a couple of years ago and knocked off the Celtics. But to your point,
Real
you
quick
don't,
though, I think
yeah,
they were a heel team for a second. And the only second that I think they were a heel team for is, and I think this is the problem here, like you said, they were definitely faces when they won that first championship.
hmm
When they lost against Cleveland in that second year, they America still wanted them to win. Then
yeah,
that third year comes, they get KD now. I don't think they're healed yet. I think America is still riding for them to beat LeBron because
yeah,
there's
oh yeah,
so many anti-LeBron. Because so now
yeah,
they're like, okay, well, LeBron, you got one. Ha ha ha. Now they got KD. Let's see what you do. And I think they got that win against them, and everyone's like, yes. And they're still face. And I think even that second year that they go back with KD and they beat LeBron again, I still don't think they're full healed yet. I think now they're about to make their heel turn in a second once they, you know, beat up on Cleveland again, so to speak, backstage. And now America is like, oh my God, you guys are just beating these guys senseless and we can't take this anymore. So now when they come back in that next finals, now they're full heel and everyone wants to see Toronto win. And then what happens?
they
KD
went.
goes down, and now they're not a heel anymore because now it's like, oh, we know you're going to lose, and now
Mhm.
KD leaves, and it's like, oh, you guys aren't going to be the same again. So they never really got to be like full blown Roddy Piper mega heel. You know what I
Right.
mean?
I mean, to your point though, I think what has like hurt the NBA in that standpoint is the consistent player movement, as far as like guys,
Mm-hmm.
want not,
100%.
not wanting to be on teams as long because there's no buildup, if you will. I mean, you think back to the Lakers, Kobe's Lakers, with Kobe and Shaq. I think in 2000, there was a sentiment that a lot of people wanted to see them win because, okay, the big fella hadn't won a championship. And of course, to where we started with this about being the face of the league, a lot of these younger cats, they don't like how a guy like Shaq or Charles Barkley or Kenny Smith and these guys are talking about him on TNT. But I guarantee you, up until that point, when he finally won in 2000, Shaquille O'Neal was getting immense criticism
Mm-hmm.
for not being able to win. Shaquille O'Neal, throughout his prime of his NBA career, also received a lot of criticism because there were people who felt that Shaq was out of shape and overweight at times. Okay, and Shaq still gets some heat, from that to this day. So it's like, but Shaq embraced it, and it's still, one of the greatest players ever. But again, it's one of those where, like, with all of this player movement that we currently have, guys are not together long enough for you to build something up with. It's like, to the football analogy with the Chiefs, it's like, okay, the Chiefs, like, you want to see them lose right now because, or like, if you're in that category,
Mm-hmm.
from the standpoint that, like, hey, you know what, you're tired of seeing Mahomes, and then this is no fault of theirs, but you're tired of, like, every time that Kelsey makes a big catch or makes a touchdown, for the Chiefs, what's the first thing that the networks do? Like, and it's no fault of his or hers, but who are they panning to? Okay, and sweet, you know what I'm saying? So but you got to give them something to root against, and it's like, yeah, the NFL, they had that lull, late 90s, early 2000s, because I think it was parody there, for a
Mm-hmm.
while, and that was that era where, what, it was post that dominant streak of the NFC. I think they had won 13 straight Super Bowls. So the Super Bowl basically became a game again. And I remember Super Bowl 36. And I was in college at the time, and like I did a Super Bowl preview show, and the guys that I did it with looked at me like I was crazy because I was the only one to pick the Patriots to win that day. And a lot of people showed up to see a dynasty born, and the wrong dynasty was born because the Rams were about to make it, 2 and 3 years. And then, of course, Tom Brady was loved. Tom Brady was loved for the first couple of championships, because the NFL they were looking for that next golden boy. They were looking for that next Joe Montana type scenario because I remember even in the second Super Bowl, it was basically, well, you know, Brady, like Joe Montana, is not throwing an interception. And then very next play, I think he threw an interception in the end zone, okay, against Carolina. But nonetheless, it wasn't until Spygate that everybody's mindset changed. And then, of course, the Patriots became villains from that standpoint on. But guess what? They embraced it. And it was like if you were in, but the Boston area or any of the New England states, you loved the Patriots. Every place else, what, they were vilified. But that was one team that really embraced it. And of course, what happened? It became must see TV. The guys nowadays in the NBA, there's nobody that's really likable. Sticking with basketball, excuse me, but on a different level, you think about the Big East. And I remember when this new indoctrination of the Big East started about 12 years ago due to college basketball realignment. So they got the new deal with Fox. And the late John Thompson II was interviewed by Fox, and he was asked, can this league be successful? Why? Because what made the original Big East were the coaches. And it wasn't just the fact that we're talking about legendary coaches. You had legendary coaches who did not like each other.
with
Okay.
personality.
With personalities. Okay. And with that said, John Thompson II said, you know what? These guys, I don't know. They're too many milk drinking choir boys. All right. But it was one of those like, but to that original Big East credit, those guys had personalities and you knew what you were getting. John Thompson, a 6'10" black man, you know, coaching, one of the best teams in the nation at that time, had arguably the best player in college basketball at that time, and Patrick Ewing. John Thompson was always going to have, that towel over his shoulder. And it was always, and John Thompson was always had a look on his face like, you know what? Mess with me if you want to. Lou Carnesecca, with his personality. Um,
Those
you know,
sweaters.
yeah, you know what I'm saying? Rick Pitino, Rolly Massimino. We can go right down the list. But you have to give people a story. You've got to give them something that is going to captivate them. You've got to give them something that is going to draw them in. And I think that is something right now that the NBA is missing, the drama aspect of it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And you made a point earlier that I said we would kind of read each other's minds here with this. You mentioned his name. I won't. I actually bought a prop just to kind of illustrate something, and I won't mention his name just because he's a. But in the late '80s, all the way to 1990, there was a gentleman who carried this beautiful thing right here, and every kid wanted one of these beautiful things. And the symbol of this beautiful thing right here was you knew it was the best of the best. And a face of anything has to be something that the people can stand behind, that they can get behind, that they can cheer for, root for, be invested for. The first form of sports entertainment that we got before sports turned to sports entertainment was the WWF. And this dude who carried this belt, this title, he carried it in a way like no one else before him, which allowed the WWF to become something that nobody saw coming. Without this dude, the WWF would have never been anything. The WWE wouldn't be what it is today. And it was an interesting part in his reign as the top guy, as the face of the league, so to speak. There came a point where he had not one but two people whose popularity soared as high as his, and the company decided to pivot. Here's the difference, obviously scripted, where they can pivot to who they want to be the top guy. It's not a situation where that person has to kind of take the reins in sports. So, let's use Macho Man for example. This dude took over the reins from the original champ only because this guy was so big. He went to go shoot a movie. He became so huge that it was like, we got to have you go do something even bigger to grow our league. So now we're going to have your number two kind of take the reins. And they were good, but they weren't as good. Like, they saw their numbers decline slightly. So big guy comes back, takes his normal spot over after him and Macho Man feud. And then after that, Vince McMahon is still searching, as any great businessman should. You're never complacent. There's always, something tomorrow, because you may be on top today, but tomorrow you can, something can happen and now you're an afterthought. So Vince McMahon, looking forward, trying to figure out the next big thing, finds the next big thing in the Ultimate Warrior. And this dude takes force like no one had ever seen anybody take force in anything at that time. Like, this dude became a phenomenon overnight, to the point where now the big dude at the time is just getting pushed to the side. Like, kids are going to the freaking store and mom's got $10 for you to get one toy. And without question, it used to be the guy who wore the red and yellow, but now all of a sudden it's, no, I want the dude with the strings and the face paint. Like, I want that dude. So what did WWF do? What they were supposed to do. Hey, it's time for you to no longer be the guy. It's time for you to give it up, give it over to the next guy. Didn't want to do it, but reluctantly did it. It was supposed to be what's best for business. So now, fast forward, WWF's got this guy as the guy. The Ultimate Warrior is now the guy. And now suddenly, we, the fans, the world, were invested in his rise and him getting there. And once he got there, it was just kind of blah. Now, the company's starting to lose tons of money. Got to figure out what to do. Well, we got to take the title from him, and we got to figure out a way to get it back to our guy. So what do? We take the title from him, and we give it to a guy who used to be our big hero, Sergeant Slaughter. But now he's a turncoat, because we have perfect storyline. This is why Vince McMahon is great at what he did. Perfect storyline. Let's now side him with a country that we are actually going to war with at this time. So now we can make our original guy champ again and stand on the American value even more, because he already had it as part of his gimmick. That right there is how you run a franchise, a league. And like I said, they have it a little bit easier because they can script it. But that's when you know you've got a guy, you ride with that person, and even when you make a mistake and you take it away too soon, you go right back and you ride with him again until the wheels completely fall off.
Yeah, listen, I think that's, to your point, that's why they're gonna have to rock with LeBron and Steph a little bit longer, because it's like, listen, there's no other guy, there right now. And I mean, I still think that we're at the point with the NBA that, there's more people out there that want to see LeBron, fail than there are that want to see him succeed. Listen, I mean, I think back to it's almost 2 years now, okay, since the Nuggets, because I think they won the championship 2023. So I think they beat the Lakers in the Western Conference Finals that year, if my memory doesn't fail me. Okay.
Handled them pretty easy. I think it
Or
was 4-0 or 4-1, one of the
yeah,
two.
it was 4-0 because they closed them out in LA.
Yeah, yep.
So my point is this. Nuggets win the Western Conference Championship for the first time in LA. Okay, they sweep them. They're going to the NBA Finals for the first time. Instead of the cameras focusing on the Joker and this team, what are they focusing on? All of the like they focused on the Nuggets and Joker for like 15 seconds. The
Right.
rest of the time was literally showing LeBron, walk into the dressing room. You know what I'm saying? So at the end of the day, it's still a better, story for the networks, for the media to see the guy who was lost than to go out there and embrace the guy that just beat him. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? And that right there, they don't have that guy to your point, like to what LeBron had said before, as far as the media, maybe that factors into it right there. As
Yeah.
far as like, the negativity aspect. But at the end of the day, there are more people out there that would want to see him get there and not win than there are people who out there who actually want to see them win. And like I said before, the NBA could say whatever they want. I guarantee you they would love to have Lakers Celtics in the finals again.
Oh, absolutely. And I
I
think that's what we're going to get.
you know, so it's and I think that right there is, what frustrates a lot of people because from the standpoint that hey, the way that Luka Doncic ended up in LA, and it was like, okay, a lot of people are going to say, hey, it's shades of Pau Gasol all over again with how he ended up in LA. And of course, that year, the first year that Powell got to LA, what happened? The Lakers got to the finals, they lost to the Celtics. So, of course, in a 3 year stretch, we got Lakers versus Celtics two times in the NBA finals. And you know, I think they would love to do that again. And that's why I think it's no coincidence that Luca ended up in LA because at the end of the day, when ratings are down, what do you do? Oh, let's go back to what we do best, like you said. Let's put Lakers and Celtics out there because because it sells, and it's one of those where nobody's going to sit up there. The casual fan's not going to sit up there and watch OKC Celtics, okay, in the NBA Finals. The casual basketball fan is not going to sit up there and watch Nuggets Bucks in the finals. They're just not. Okay, and I mean, is it still going to be great basketball?
Yep.
Absolutely, but at the end of the day, you've got to give people, the casual fan, okay, something that they can get behind. I think
Especially
back,
on your biggest stage.
yeah, I mean, I think back to 1999. The NBA was fresh off of the lockout. Jordan had stopped playing for the Bulls. Ratings were down, attendance was down, this, that, and the third. We just saw the Spurs win their first NBA championship. But I think what helped sell it was the fact that hey, you got the Knicks in the finals,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
you got that New York market, so that brought in more people, even though the Knicks were clearly outmatched, and
You
then
know, another thing I think helped that series, the
hmm
fact that the strike.
yeah,
I think that the fact that the way they marketed it
hmm
after the strike, I think
yeah,
saved a lot of ratings, man.
yeah, yeah, and it's like that's the thing, man. It's just like you gotta give people a compelling story, okay, from the entertainment aspect. You think about Barry Bonds, for an example. There's people today that will acknowledge him as baseball's home run king. There's people who won't. But I guarantee you, for probably like the last 6 or 7 years of Barry Bonds' career, not a lot of people missed an at bat, regardless if they knew what was going on or not. And
Right.
it was the same thing with McGuire and Sosa in '98, and of course, what helped that was the fact that you have two guys in the same division. And of
Mm-hmm.
course, in those days before, MLB had this whole thing where like everybody's got to play everybody. You played everybody from your division about 20 times. So, of course, you were going to see plenty of games between Cubs and Cardinals. And then, of course, the game where McGuire, broke Roger Maris's record, that was against the Cubs. You know what I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying? So, like him and Sosa were there together. But nonetheless, the point I'm just trying to make It's entertainment at the end of the day. And like you said, you need your heroes and you need your villains.
Yeah,
Regardless, regardless of the sport. And I think, even with the Celtics and Lakers of the 80s, there was always that buildup to say, hey, was there going to be a team out there that could knock them off? And of course, in the 90s with Mike, there was always a storyline, going into the finals each and every year with the Bulls. The first time around, is the final stage going to be too big for Michael Jordan? Does Magic Johnson have another one in him? Then 92, the whole thing, Michael Jordan against Clyde Drexler, one of his dream team teammates. And then, of course, Mike versus Barkley in 93, 96, the redemption of Michael Jordan after being out. And then 97, it was one of those where there wasn't a lot of storyline going into 97 with the Jazz, but that was a great series. And I think that helped to make the 98 finals, more compelling because, like, yo, it was the second time going to be the charm for the Jazz. And of course, Utah, quote unquote, did everything right. They came back hungry that year. They finished with a better record than the Bulls. They swept the Bulls in the regular season, all of that stuff. Um, but at the end of the day, like I said before, the casual fan needs a storyline. And again, there's of the next generation, I feel like Ant-Man checks most of the boxes as far as being a guy who can do that because Ant-Man on the court has the it factor. You know what I'm saying? As far as like, yo, this guy can fly. This guy embraces the moment, you know, all of that stuff. And that's why I think it was frustrating to see the Timberwolves get to the Western Conference Finals last year and then trade Cat. And I'm like, okay, y'all are hustling backwards here. I don't get it.
it's
But
that
no,
money, man.
yeah, you know what I mean? And now, the Timberwolves have really dipped down the scale, if you will, in the Western Conference. But I think like a guy like Ant-Man, and I hate to say this, Ant-Man's gonna have to get out of Minnesota. Ant-Man's gonna have to get himself to a bigger market. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, definitely for the growth of that aspect. But here's the thing that with him making those comments, I don't like. Do you come back from that? Here's a guy basically saying he doesn't want it, and here's a point that we made kind of last week in difference of leadership. When it comes to Adam Silver versus David Stern, guarantee you, David Stern still is alive and kicking, and the commissioner of the NBA, Ant Man, is getting a call from David Stern saying, "Hey, that's not we don't answer questions like that way because that not only puts a hurting on yourself but it hurts a hurting on the entire shield, and you're not going to hurt this shield here." Adam Silver probably didn't even bat an eye to the comment.
Well, I will agree and I'll disagree with you at the same time on that comment. I will agree with the standpoint that, you know, he would have gotten a call from David Stern, but it would have been one of those like, listen, the call would have been, I want you on the next plane to New York, and I want to meet you in my office.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely right.
One of those type things. And you would have seen something where he'd have been going in the side entrance, at the Park Avenue offices, to sit down and talk with David Stern. One of those type scenarios. So, but again, I just think that it's going to have to be a committee
Yeah,
for, and I think for their sake, they still got a couple of years with LeBron and Steph. I think they're going to ride this thing out, till the brakes fall off. And I think if they could somehow, some way get Lakers and Celtics in the NBA Finals, that's one thing. But in a lead up, if you're talking about the NBA could get themselves Warriors, Lakers again,
oh, if they
and
could
and,
get that in the Western
and
Finals.
yeah, or Western Conference playoffs, period.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
and I and I think
it
also
can't be first round though. It's got to be
no,
second. It's got to be
yeah.
second or later.
Or, also in another scenario, because it's shaping up to be like that right now, if they could get Knicks Celtics in the second round of
Mm-hmm.
the Eastern Conference playoffs, I think the NBA would be happy with that as well because it's one of those where, granted, I think that series is only going to go one way, but
Mm-hmm.
nonetheless, it's one of those where it's still that whole Boston, New York narrative. So I think, and it's like you're talking about two old
Right.
iconic franchises. And I think that's something that they would love to push as well.
Yeah, but outside of those three series, they
Hmm.
literally got nothing as far as anything that could possibly shape up to be compelling.
No,
Like nothing.
no.
So they got to pray and hope that that happens. Otherwise, they can't even maximize their bang for their buck in
No.
this playoff run at all. So I got a question for you, right?
Hmm.
So we're talking about the villains in the NBA and how we basically don't have any. Like basically, LeBron is the last villain in the NBA.
Hmm.
He retires. Let's say he miraculously plays another 2, 3 seasons. Like very well could happen with Luca now come in and take some of the weight off of him, and he doesn't have to now be the ball dominant player that he had to be, before then. Once he's gone, and now the NBA doesn't have that villain at all. So now we don't have the hero. We don't have a definite hero. We don't have a definite villain. What, if any, is there a fix from there?
I don't know because I think what they're going to try to do. I think they're going to, like I said, I think they're going to ride this LeBron train to it before it goes off the tracks. And I guess they figure, you know what, we'll figure out the rest when we have to go out there and figure out the rest. But as of right now, I just don't see that next guy who's simply waiting on the wings to be like, hey, you know what, pass the baton to me. I'm ready to go. Now, what could help that is if the Celtics go back to back. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Because we haven't had a back-to-back champion since the Warriors. I think in
Mm-hmm.
2018. Okay, so it's
Yeah.
6 years, and that's not a long stretch per se to say for a back-to-back for not having a back-to-back champion. But I think anytime that you get a team in any sport, once they reach that level where they go back to back, they become a villain.
Mm-hmm.
Or, sometimes when you have different circumstances, teams become a villain. You look at baseball, okay? Baseball has multiple villains, okay? For the last couple of years, it's been the Houston Astros. And a lot of people have hated them. For years and years, it still continues to be the New York Yankees. And then, of course, right now, the Dodgers because of the fact that the Dodgers spend. I know the Mets spend like the Dodgers as well, but the Mets still haven't won anything in like a dog's age. So it's like it's really, tough for people to root against them. You
Right.
know, don't get me wrong. When the Mets won in the 1980s, they were hated by a lot of places outside of New York. But at the end of the day, baseball has villains. Hockey, I really don't see it right now. Of course, there's rivalries between players, and there's also rivalries with teams. And then, of course, with football, I think we've now transitioned from Brady's Patriots and Brady's Bucks.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, they're starting to get there with Mahomes and stuff because I still think there's plenty of people out there that love Mahomes and they love the Chiefs. Okay,
No, there definitely is, but this I think this was the year.
yeah.
Last year, like there was still everybody like go Chiefs, go Chiefs, go Chiefs. This year, there were
Hmm.
tons of people like no, screw these guys.
Yeah. Yeah, so and I think, right now the NBA simply doesn't have that story. Maybe, and I don't think they should try to push it, just let it happen naturally, of course. But if the Celtics do become, a repeat champion, I think that would push that narrative. And you're gonna find it's hard to believe. As many championships as the Celtics have won, they have not gone back to back since Bill Russell was there.
Yeah, no, that's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, they had that chance, with that Pierce KG team, Ray Allen. If KG doesn't go down,
Right. Oh,
if
definitely.
KG doesn't go down, they repeat.
Oh, oh, definitely,
But
definitely.
you definitely it's got to be repeat winners, and you've got to have an antagonist on the team, even if the person doesn't want to necessarily be an antagonist. LeBron is that dude on that Heat team. That was the last kind of heel team, so to speak, in the NBA.
Well, it's funny that you say that because with the Warriors, you got a little bit of both because you had the guy that people liked in Steph Curry, and then you had that
Mm-hmm.
guy that people didn't like in Draymond, and then of course You
Yeah,
had
he's
people,
not big enough of a starter, really.
and then you
You
had
know,
people, who didn't like KD because KD, left Russ, after they got to the Western Conference Finals and had Golden State on the ropes to join Golden State, so like naturally.
right?
But at the end of the day, I don't think everybody, fully did not like the Warriors because I think that Steph and Clay were likable. They were
Yeah,
still they were still likable. You know what I'm saying? So
yeah. Not only that, but Steve Kerr, like outspoken coach.
right,
People like him. His story, everything. So,
right,
no heels. They got to figure something out there. They've either got to figure out a hero or a villain. If they can't do that, they've got to figure out a heel team or a face team. Like it's got to be something. Like you can't just sit here and basically what the NBA reminds me of. And I heard somebody say this a while ago, but everybody's just kumbaya. And the reason that everyone's just kumbaya is because they go to dinner before the game, they go hang out at each other's houses after the game. It's just one big friend fun fest. I get it, but at some point in time, hey, guess what? Guarantee you, The Rock and John Cena don't necessarily disagree or like each other backstage all along, but when it's time to turn on the cameras, hey, no hugs.
yeah. And see, just jumping the shark real quick. That's what helped a guy like Jimmy Butler when he was with the Heat get to the NBA
Yeah,
Finals because if you look at those two runs by the Heat when they went to the finals with Jimmy during the playoffs, basically, and I've talked about this, and I'll say it again. Jimmy was out there taking people's lunch money.
right,
You know what I'm saying?
right.
Because he had that mentality. You know what I'm saying?
He was
And
the
I
gooch playing basketball.
pretty much, and I think and I think that's going to serve. I think that's going to serve the Warriors well in the postseason when they get there because they're playing some great ball right now as well. Is that Jimmy's one of those guys that Jimmy wants to go out there and take your lunch money. And where do you take somebody's lunch money? You take their lunch money at the defensive end of the floor. So a lot of these teams that
Right.
have solid perimeter scorers, and now, man, you got to deal with this guy who's locked in for an entire playoff series. Okay, he's got something to prove. He's getting his smile back for basketball and then the Golden State Warriors put a little love in his pocket, by the way of a contract extension. So I think that right there makes for some compelling ball.
Yeah, absolutely. I just thought about this too. The one dude who the NBA does have who could be mega villain number one can't stay healthy, and that's Joel Embiid. He's a guy who's a natural troll, just
Yeah,
kind of gives off that vibe of
right.
villainous, and
Yeah.
he just can't stay healthy. If that dude could stay healthy, he could piss off enough people
Oh
to
yeah.
have Philly relevant. To is obviously good enough to have Philly relevant, and then you add that with the fact that he's pissing people off.
Yeah.
Now you got your villain, but the dude just can't stay healthy.
Yeah. Listen, your best ability is your availability.
Yeah.
That's it. That's it,
Yep.
man.
In any walk of life, man.
Nah. But I mean, listen, we covered a lot, in this aspect, and I think both of us are gonna leave it up to y'all, as far as like who you feel should be the next face of the NBA, or will there be a next face of the NBA? I mean, I truly do think it's gonna take a couple of years. I truly
Mm-hmm.
do. You know what I'm saying? Because I don't, so to speak, I don't see there being anybody out there that quote unquote wants all the smoke, good or bad. They
Nope.
they they just don't want it. You know what I'm saying? I think you got some guys out there, you know what? I'm good with my 40, 50, $60 million a year. I'm good with my endorsement money, this, that, and the third. I'm gonna take my checks. I'm gonna go home and I'm chill with my family.
Yep.
I will show up and hoop, yeah, but all of the other stuff, Commissioner Silver, everybody else, I'm good.
Right. Right.
Yeah, man. But listen, as always, man, it was a pleasure to have you on. And it's one of those where I guess I'm gonna call you the undisputed champ right now because I see you rocking that. You got the world title in the
Oh man, the
background.
old school winged eagle right here, man. I
Yeah,
had to do this. This went on sale a little while ago, and like this is the belt that we grew up idolizing as kids. So I had to treat myself, man. I had to do it.
I look at that and all I can think about is Mr. Perfect taking a belt with a sledgehammer. You know what I'm saying? That I mean, listen, that's all I could think about. But yeah, man.
Great show, man. It was always great being here with you, man. The way how we just bounce these ideas off of each other and just kind of give the world some good like I said, free words of wisdom is always great, man.
Exactly, man. Trust me, man. It was truly a pleasure, and I hope that you folks out there chiming in on this and enjoyed it as well. If you like what you heard and saw, please feel free to hit that like button as well as subscribing to this channel. Also, if you're on the X, formerly known as Twitter, please feel free to follow me at 300 Pounds of Sports. And like I always say, if you follow me, it'd be my pleasure to follow you right back. There's also the sports discussion group on Facebook at the Sports Depot 365. You could check it out, drop a line to be a part of one of the better sports debating sites going on social media. And Mark, before we sign off, any social media platforms out there where the folks can find you on?
You can catch me on the Kitchen Sink podcast every once in a while when I do get that thing rolling. But tomorrow I'm actually going to be doing a little interview, kind of a different weird situation, but a friend of the program here with 300 pounds of sports knowledge is Big Fan Breezy. And Big Fan Breezy asked to like interview me one on one about just things going on, things that I'm doing voiceover wise, and just a little bit of sports. We'll probably talk and everything like that. So definitely check that out. I don't even have the link for that right now, but what I'll do is post the link to that in the comments of this, and just keep linking things up.
There you go, man. Listen. It's it makes it go around. That's that. I mean, listen. That's the best way to sum it up. But once again, fine folks, my name is William Martin. I'm signing off. Thanks once again to Mark Jenkins. I hope that y'all like what you heard and saw in this podcast. And thanks once again for tuning in to the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. Be well, everybody.